Well, a very warm good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, viewers. I'm Matthias Aufiku, news editor of the Namibian Sun newspaper. Well, today is the 3rd of May, also World Press Freedom Day. You can imagine what that means for us as media practitioners in the country. That will be the topic that we'll be touching tonight. But before we get to that, let's have a look at Thursday's headlines. Well, you can expect a story on the African swine flu fever warning as checks on EU imports are ditched. It looks like the pig sector in the UK is not happy with some of the measures that are being ditched by the authorities that side as far as ensuring that animals that are imported into their jurisdiction are free from any diseases. Well, you can also expect a story on, the ongoings in Russia. We spoke to the executive director in the International Relations Ministry, Mr. Penda Nanda. We just asked him how the embassy is operating in Moscow, especially in hindsight with the sanctions imposed on that country. So he says everything is business as usual as far as the embassy's operations are concerned. Well, another story that has always, it's been coming, of course, along the years, the war veterans. There's a group that met Defense Minister Franz Kapofi earlier today, just to air their frustrations towards what they term the slow-paced disbursements of funds. They say there are about 12,000 war vets that are yet to receive their 200,000 funds. Well, as indicated earlier on, today, 3rd of May, is our day as journalists, media practitioners. And so it shouldn't come as a surprise that we have Mr. John Nakuta, the media ombudsman, in our midst, albeit virtually tonight. Mr. Nakuta, welcome and good evening.
Good evening, and thank you very much for the invitation, Matthew.
No, it's good to have you.
Very good to participate in this activity in celebration of World Press Freedom Day, as you said.
Yeah, no, it's good to have you here. Well, before we get into the gist of the discussions, perhaps as the media ombudsman, how are we faring as the media? Of course, you are there also to make sure that we don't abuse those we report on. How are we doing? Are we making strides or are we busy regressing?
You mean in terms of the media landscape in Namibia?
The landscape itself in Namibia, yes.
Okay. I would say we are doing quite well, and that is attested to this year's ranking. I'm sure you know, like everyone else, we've jumped up at least 6 places from 24 last year in terms of world rankings, and this year we are ranked number 18 in the world, and for consistently since 2019, the first one in Africa. So we are doing quite well in terms of the media space, but obviously there are room for improvement, and one room of improvement is in terms of the legislation. And I think if one looks at the indicators that is used to rank countries across the world, we are seemingly very low in terms of the legal framework, especially the fact that we still don't have an Access to Information Act on our law books. But overall, we are really doing quite well. And we need to congratulate both government and media practitioners and everyone that is working in the space, in the media space.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Well, of course, critics would perhaps argue argue that we would like to pride ourselves based on these rankings as a primary indicator as to how well we are faring. But do you think there are other perhaps mechanisms we can use to really gauge how we are doing as an industry?
Well, I think the rankings, I think we shouldn't also sell ourselves short. Why should we, I'm just thinking, why should we dispute this ranking? Because this ranking is not just for Namibia. There are various indicators, various criteria used, and for each of those criteria, there are specific indicators, and a country is ranked from 0 to 100, where 0 is very low, and 100 is obviously the highest mark that you can score. And on all these indicators used internationally, we are scoring quite high. So I don't see the need why we should have a specific domesticated, if I got you correctly, a domestic kind of ranking for ourselves. No, we are peer-reviewed with all other countries, and in terms of that standard, we are doing quite well. And I don't think and these rankings are done by independent experts. So yes, so we shouldn't sell ourselves short.
Yeah. I asked that question because over the past few years, and especially more so with the advent of social media, you would see how the public on a daily basis, fairly or unfairly so, would express their concerns or unhappiness or displeasure towards the way the media does its work. Is that an indicator, or it's just something that we should expect as an industry?
I think I think I would agree with everyone that would be saying that Namibia is not a village. And it is not just in Namibia where the general public would be complaining about how journalists are doing their work and whatever. All of us know that Fox News, I've listened the other day to Trevor Noah making fun and of Fox News. Everyone is complaining how Fox News are reporting their news and from which angle and whatever. And people are concerned. So what I'm trying to say, yes, people are complaining, are concerned, are expressing the views in terms of how Namibian journalists and media practitioners are doing their work, but that is to be expected. Journalists are human beings, and as a result, they are fallible and imperfect. So obviously, there would be some shortcomings and some flaws in terms of the way they have been doing their work and are still doing their work. Yeah.
Well, of course, your office primarily exists to ensure that those who feel aggrieved by media reports have a place of recourse. Well, what type of, whether it's complaints or concerns have you been receiving that are lodged to your office by the public?
If I were to answer that question, I would say I'll use my 4.5 years as being the media ombudsman to categorize the type of complaints that I've been receiving. And for me, it mainly falls within almost like, say, 5 categories. The one is inaccurate reporting, that some journalists are really just sloppy, not doing enough research, and just want to have a seemingly a story out there for the sake of having a story because they are rushed with time, they've got their own deadlines and so forth. And as a result, what they put out there in some cases seems not to be a well-researched article or publication, which sometimes is having a lot of inaccuracies. And then what we've also seen, and you've talked about the importance and the prevalence of social media in the country and what role it plays. And so what I've seen is that sometimes journalists, media practitioners would be reporting directly from someone's social page, be it Facebook, Twitter, or whichever social page is there, and then pretend and front as if the person whose Facebook page or Twitter account has been used has been interviewed. And that has been a concern. In fact, I had such a complaint about a month and a half ago. And I made the point is that with all these fake accounts that is out there, you cannot for sure say that it is John Nakuta's Facebook account. So it is enough that you've said it on your Facebook account or Twitter account, and I quote you as if I've interviewed you. So no, you need to verify your sources, and the code is very clear on that point. And so that is one. Another one that we've also seen is that sometimes people would be complaining to the media ombudsman, and being a lawyer, I know there's this doctrine of a matter being sub judice.
Yeah.
Just for fairness, that you do not report on something which has been under consideration by some adjudicator, because that would mean you are prejudging or want to influence the outcome of that thing. And so what we've seen is that some journalists, because they know that they've been reported to, so to speak, or a complaint has been laid to the media ombudsman, and so they would report on the very same thing and indicate to the general public that so-and-so has in the meantime laid a complaint with the media ombudsman. I don't know for what they would want to do that.
Yeah.
And then one last one that I've also noticed is that journalists, as the code would require, if there's a need for a correction, or if there's a need to tender an apology, what media houses would be doing, they would tender that apology. They would make that correction, but not give it the same prominence as the code dictates that the initial publication was given. So these are some of the complaints that I've received. And one last one, also very concerning, and which is really a struggle for myself and for everyone else, is that there's a lot of journalists that are doing freelance work. In other words, they don't belong to any media house. And so some complaints are directed to some of these freelance journalists, but the media ombudsman under the code does not have any jurisdiction or mandate over such freelance journalists, and that seems to be a big gap in the media code.
Yeah, of course. Well, media houses have a big role to play as far as determining who the media ombudsman will be. In terms of independence, what assurance is there for the public to say, if you approach Mr. Nakuta's office in his capacity as a media ombudsman, rest assured that you will receive objective, fair and balanced treatment as far as your complaint is concerned?
Right. The media ombudsman is not linked to any media house. That is one. The media ombudsman is you don't apply to the office of the ombudsman. At the end of the office, when I would vacate this office next year in August, September, what will happen is that a general advert would be placed in all major newspapers and also on social media spaces, asking the general public to nominate someone of good character that can serve as a media ombudsman. And of course, the code has been initiated by the Editors Forum of Namibia. But the Auditors Forum of Namibia is really only, and that is my 4 years experience, as only being involved in the appointment of the media ombudsman, and that's all. And of course, paying the person a monthly stipend, because this work is mainly done voluntarily. You are not attached to any media house. And so obviously the person that is supposed to occupy this position must be personally, administratively, budgetary, and institutionally independent. And so far, that is indeed the situation. Of course, the situation is not ideal because currently the office is not really sufficiently funded so as to do its own programs, to go out there to advertise and publicize the work of the media ombudsman. But in terms of independence, there's really no interference. I can assure the general public. Obviously, there's probably room for improvement, but at the moment, the office is administratively, institutionally, budgetary, independent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Nakuta, we will go for a short break. Upon our return, I want us to touch on the issue of self-regulation. And of course, the theme of this year's World Press Freedom Day, journalism under digital siege. So I just want you to get your thoughts in order along those two topics for when we return after the break.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, well, we'll go for a short break and we'll be back soon.
Okay.
Adam Tas is coming to Windhoek to help build a brighter future for education. Join us at the Sounds of Caring concert at Windhoek High School Vegkop on 20 and 21 May, where he will be performing with Von Arends and Rian Smith. Tickets cost $200 Namibian and are available via eticket.my.na. All proceeds go towards the African Child Development Trust.
Well, let me welcome our viewers back from that short break. Mr. Nakuta, shall we continue our conversation?
Please do.
Self-regulation in Namibia. Do you think it's working? Is it working?
Of course, it is working to a very large extent, but I would also be the first one to admit that there are some loopholes in the current system. And to be very upfront, the current system does not have, the media ombudsman may make a ruling. And I gave at least two rulings in the past where the media house simply refused to even though the code is saying that the rulings made by the media ombudsman are binding. That's the word. The particular media house that I ruled against about a year and a half ago never bothered to implement the ruling of the media ombudsman, and there's no recourse for the media ombudsman currently under the code in terms of what to do.
Yeah.
And then there's another challenge that I find very difficult to enforce is that the code talks about repeating offenders, so to speak. Like a media house that continuously violates the code. Now, the problem is that with that provision that I find very hard to apply is that, yes, you may have this media house which might be having a lot of complaints against it, but it is not always the same journalist.
Yeah.
That would be in the wrongs, whatever. So yes, it is the same media house, but it is not the same media journalist that I'm trying to say. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
So because you can't obviously, or is it a question of you cumulatively saying that out of all the complaints that we've received, 90% is against this media house, and most of them are really around the same thing. Maybe I was supposed to think out of the box, say that so as to make a kind of a decision as to whether there's need for training, because the media ombudsman in terms of the code is having the power to impose a 50,000 fine on such a media house, and such funds can be used for training purposes.
Yeah.
So that is one of the challenges that I've came across in my tenure as media ombudsman.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but then how can we say self-regulation is working, but on the other hand, you are complaining that you don't have any powers in terms of seeking recourse when your decisions are ignored by media houses?
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm saying out of the 4 years that I'm in this position, I've got only 2 instances where the rulings of the media ombudsman was not complied with. And unlike in a court of law, there's no in a normal circumstances, if it was in a court of law situation, it would have been contempt of court. But the code does not address that. And so that's what I'm drawing the point. But with that, I'm not saying that it is not working. It is, and it's really working. One of the things that I'm normally indicating is that I get as media ombudsman during my term of office, one of the things that I can honestly say without fear or favor is the kind of support that I'm getting from both editors-in-chiefs, and the journalists across the board. So that is not what I was trying to say. So self-regulation by the very nature is that your peers are going to put pressure on you. That is the purpose of self-regulation. And by you seeing that you are always in the wrongs, you are always being flagged for not adhering to media codes of ethics. That is the kind of pressure, peer pressure, that the code of conduct is trying to achieve, and it's really working. To a very large extent, media houses are very much complying with the code of ethics and conduct of the media.
Well, just lastly, as we wrap up, this year's theme, journalism under digital siege. Well, what do you make of it in the Namibian context? Do you think there's a siege on us?
Maybe with your permission, maybe just to give context in terms of, I've listened into a webinar that was conducted in Tanzania over the weekend addressing the same theme. And you can see some trends happening in the sub-region, and you can tell that Namibia is almost moving towards that direction. If you listen to some of the comments of the politicians and some of the legislatures, I give you 2 of the things that that was flagged over the weekend. One, for example, in Zambia, there's apparently a law that provides that for people that are belonging to a WhatsApp group of more than 100 people, those people necessarily by default then becomes a broadcaster, and they must then apply for a broadcasting license. Now that is chilling, because that obviously, that legal provision is how the law can be used to silence dissent, to silence and to encroach on freedom of expression. Another thing that is happening in the sub-region is this notion in everyone knows that in Mozambique there is the insurgency currently going on, and apparently they've got a law that has been passed saying that any journalist that is reporting in a manner that creates fear in the mind of the public exposes him or herself of being convicted of a crime. I don't know what is the crime now called, but these are the examples whereby journalists and the general public are really under siege in terms of this. And of course, in the case of Namibia, there was a 3-page part series in 2020 in the Namibian, in terms of how journalism is really under siege in Namibia. It was, for example, reported that I think is the motherboard company, reported in London that Namibia was one of the countries that bought high-tech surveillance equipment from this London-based company. And this equipment can be used to trace your cell phones, your conversations and whatever. That is worrying. And that actually gives credence to the notion that some journalists and the civil society organizations are feeling that they are under surveillance by the Namibia. What is this? You had an issue with them, if I remember.
Yes. The Central Intelligence.
The Central Intelligence. So yes. So with us, it seems to be creeping in. We don't have something specific on our law books yet, but we know that they've tried to register this SIMCAS registration. It's all part of trying to encroach on the media space, freedom of expression and whatever. So we need to be worried, as I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Nakuta, thank you very much for your time and insight tonight. We really appreciate your input to our discussion tonight.
Thank you very much, Matthias, and thanks for the invitation.
Thank you, and have a pleasant evening. Well, to our viewers, that's all for tonight. Thank you for joining us. See you again tomorrow, same time, same place.